Hello, this is Kenny Williamson, and welcome back to another episode of Melchizedek Chronicles. It's good to be back. It's been a few days or a week or so since I've been on here last, so time to do another episode. Some of today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about pseudoscience and evolutionary myths, as they call it. And, so we're going to talk about that. Other than that, if you, let me try to think here. If you are needing to get in contact with me or you want any of these free stickers that we had talked about before, the Melchizedek Chronicles podcast sticker, you can get those. You can go to any of one of the websites, and right now you can click on the schedule an interview, and when that thing pops up, it's basically just a contact form, and you can type in there exactly what you want. And of course, if you put your address or whatever, your name, and say, I want a free sticker, I'll send it to you. So that's pretty easy. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's about it. If you notice, I'm wearing my HAL 9000 t-shirt. If you're listening to audio only, you can't see it, but it says HAL 9000. And the HAL 9000 is a supercomputer. Fictional, science fiction, right? And it's AI is what it was. And it's kind of funny because, we've got AI now, and AI is supposedly just, the bee's knees. And it has lots of errors, and they put disclaimers at the bottom now saying, some of the stuff that AI says may not be correct. So you need to double check what it says, especially if it's something important, right? So I've done a podcast on this before, but they call that AI hallucinations. So when AI hallucinates, it tells you a lie, basically. So if they can't get that figured out, I don't know how they could ever supposedly have AI doctors and, all the stuff they're claiming AI is going to do, because it could just lie to you and tell you you've got a disease when you don't, and pump you up full of a bunch of medicine that you don't need and kill you. I can see that happening. But anyway, so this is a HAL 9000 shirt, and the HAL 9000 came out, if you remember, in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. And basically, if you don't know what the HAL 9000 is, it was a supercomputer, it's AI, and it was installed in the ship, a spaceship called Discovery 1. And the mission of this thing was to go out to Mars, to one of the moons of Mars, okay, to, discover some alien life. Obviously, it's all fake. It's all science fiction, in case you don't know that. I am a science fiction fan. I've always liked space movies. I've always liked outer space stuff. However, I do know that it is fake. Okay, there's no such thing. However, in this movie, this AI, it malfunctioned, of course. So it supposedly got some conflicting orders or whatever its excuse was. It decided to malfunction, and it decided to kill everybody on the ship. And it almost did it. One guy, survived, Dave. But other than that, it killed everybody. And what's funny is, of course, everything's tied together, seems like. But that movie was filmed by a guy by the name of Stanley Kubrick. Okay? It was filmed in, guess what year? 1969. Guess what year we landed on the moon, supposedly? 1969. There are pictures, I don't have any of them here, but there are lots of pictures where you can see Stanley Kubrick with all the NASA guys running around, huddled together, talking. Okay, he came out with 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's impressive for 1969. I mean, you watch that movie, you'd think it's probably filmed in the 90s, early 2000s. I mean, it's nice for 1969. And so the rumor is they went to Kubrick to come up with the Apollo missions to film those, because, of course, they're filmed on a Hollywood studio somewhere, or in a, they're filmed in a studio someplace on some secret base or some Air Force base, whatever. They're fake. Okay. So that's kind of one of those questions now. If you want to know where somebody stands, like how they think about the world, one of the first questions you can ask is like, do you believe we landed on the moon? And if they say, oh yeah. Well, as soon as they say yes, you might as well just give up, because they are so brainwashed with propaganda from the movies that if they still believe that, I'm not asking them to believe in flat earth yet. I'm not asking them to believe in the Bible even. Okay. I know that's going to be way too hard for them. There's no way they can believe the word of God. There's just no way. But if you still think we went to the moon after watching all the movies, and Hollywood's even made a movie about it, Joe Rogan doesn't believe we went to the moon. He debunks it. And here a while back, he kind of backslid and said, "Oh, I believe we went to the moon now," after he got, one of his big contracts. So I'm sure they said, "Hey, shut up about that moon landing. You need to agree with everything we say." But prior to that, he debunked it. He's got lots of videos out there where he's showing you the pictures. He's saying, "Look how fake this is. It's not real." But there are people who still believe it. Of course, it's taught by mainstream science. According to our mainstream scientists that we have, it really happened. They sent these guys up to the moon in 1969. And even though you can look at the surface of the moon, and there's all kinds of ways to debunk it as far as the brightness, and you can see the fake backgrounds, and there's more, the same background is used in more than one picture, and they're supposedly in different locations. The proof is just ridiculous. And I've had a Bart Sabrell on here one time, and he talked all about it. I need to get him on here again. That was before I had video. I would love to get him back on here where people could see the pictures. But, it's been debunked. So one of my first, what I call a qualifying question, if I'm talking to anybody who claims to be a truther or claims to be, I don't know, anything, the first thing is, if they'll start arguing with me. So my very first question is, hold on a second. Do you believe we landed on the moon? And if their answer is yes, okay, I lower the bar way down, because they're nowhere near up here. Okay. They're so far down, it's unbelievable. And so then I say, well, did you go to the doctor and get you a rattlesnake bite? And how many did you get? And when they say, oh, yeah, I'm all for it, well, the conversation's over. There's nothing you're going to believe a word. You're not going to believe a word that I have to say. If you believe in the moon landing, okay, and you went and got a couple of rattlesnake bites and you're on your 15th one, there's no point in us even having a conversation. Okay? I can't tell you anything because you're not going to believe it. What you're going to believe is Cartoon Network. That's what you'll believe. You're not going to believe the truth. You don't want to hear it. Okay? And so that's what I want to kind of cover today is of course, I like reading from I get these magazines, okay, these Christian magazines, and they're full of Christian, PhDs, whatever they call themselves. A lot of them, it kind of goes like this. Is I've talked about some that are in these other magazines, okay? And I've had people come on here, they comment, and they say, well, you really let that guy have it, and this guy's a really good guy, and this guy, and I'm sure they are. And I do give them the credit if they say something true, okay? If you tell the truth, I give you credit for that. Now, if you tell a lie, you're going to have to get dinged for it. Okay, so these guys are all supposedly trained in the Bible. They went to seminaries. Okay, and I don't expect that to mean everything, because I myself am a seminary graduate. Okay, and they didn't teach you anything about flat earth. They don't teach you anything off the regular stuff. Okay. So, but they do teach you scripture, they teach you the Bible, or, try to. Some things they're wrong on, depending on where you go. So these guys are PhDs, THDs, whatever. And I've noticed in these magazines, every one of them, their credentials is really big deal. Okay, I mean, I have some of the same credentials and I never mention it, but it doesn't mean I'm any smarter than anybody else. And, if you really want to know what God wants, you need to read God's Word. You need to pick up that Bible and you need to read it. These guys here in these magazines, they're right on some things, but then they're so far off on the others. I mean, they are so far off. And so I guess they just don't believe what they're reading. I don't know. But point of the matter is these guys, is what I was going to say is, you could take a glass of water. Let's say you have a glass of water, okay, and you're fixing to drink it. And the water that's in this glass is everything this preacher or man of God or whatever he claims to be is telling you. Okay, and it looks pretty good because he's telling you about Jesus. He's telling you all the stuff you need to know. But then he goes off the rails and he tells you about something that's fake. I mean, something's not in the Bible. They get something dead wrong. Well, that's like one drop of poison in that cup. One drop of sewage in the cup. Okay, well, now he's been pretty good about everything, but now we've got one drop of sewage in there. Now, are you going to drink that cup of water? It's got raw sewage in it. It's only one drop. My way of thinking is that whole entire glass of water has now been compromised. See, the whole thing isn't good for you because there's one drop of poison in it. So you get a preacher or these guys from these seminaries and these magazines here, okay, they'll tell you some really good stuff, but then they go off the deep end and they tell you something that's completely ridiculous, okay, that's non-biblical. Or they've taken something so far out of context, or they're non-dispensationalists, so they take something from, Matthew 24 that's applying to people in the millennium, and they try to apply it to the church age today because they don't know anything, and that's that one drop, see? And pretty soon you've got several drops in there, and everything they say to me is poison. You can't go by half of what they say because they keep adding stuff in there that's not right. So that's why I jump on these guys a lot of times, is because, it's like, I thought these guys were supposed to know better than this. I mean, okay, you're this, you're a PhD, you're this and that and this and that and this and that. And you claim, you throw all these credentials out here like you really know something, and then we start going through the scripture and you miss half of it. You completely ignore the other half. So whatever doesn't fit your magazine, you don't mention. Or you completely cut it out. Or if I mention something, or anybody else, about something, hey, read this scripture right here. What's it mean? Hey, shut up. You don't know anything. That's not true. That's not realistic. That's all allegory. That's all spiritual. Spiritualize everything. And so then you can get by with anything. Excuse me, my throat. Anyway, so like in this particular magazine here, we've got Evolutionary Myths of Conventional Science. And, it's written by a PhD and another PhD. And majority of the stuff in here is right. We're going to read through it because there are a lot of good points in here. And one of the main things here is like evolutionary myths. Conventional science today, I call them devils, of course, pseudoscience, fake science, just like Trump's fake news. Okay, this is fake science. Your so-called scientists today, they still believe in evolution. They teach it. They do not believe in God. They do not believe anything in the Bible. All they believe is evolution. Now, as ridiculous as it is, and there's zero proof, evolution is a religion, just like I have a religion, okay? Mine is the religion of Jesus Christ. And they're going to say, well, yeah, but you can't prove that. You can't prove yours either. But you're betting your whole life on something that you can't prove either. Now, the Bible, lots of stuff in the Bible is correct, and they found the guy's graves, and I mean, they find the cities. Everything that it says is right, and archaeologists have discovered that. Everything that these evolutionists say is incorrect, and there is no proof, and they've never found any. So it just blows my mind that a so-called scientist, he claims he's scientist, okay, but you can't prove a thing that you're saying. It's all fake, but that's what you base everything on. How stupid. But that's the world we live in. It's controlled by Satan. What do you expect? That's what these clowns are taught. And they're taught at Harvard and Yale, these things that just crank out liberal crackpots. That's where they go. They come out of these colleges wanting, communism. They want that stuff. I mean, they come out, there is no God, and you need communism, and you need this, and you need that. Throw away your guns. Everything opposite of what they should be wanting, but that's how they're trained. Pathetic, if you ask me. Okay, so let's talk about this here real quick. This evolutionary myths. Okay, so one of the most influential, one of the most influential ideas over the history of the world is that billions of years of nothing created everything. So we have nothing, and it exploded into everything. And by the way, this nothing was the size of a dot on a page. This is science, folks, okay? This is cartoon science right here. We have nothing, and we've had nothing for billions of years, except a dot floating around in nothing. It's nothing, and it was floating around in nothing for billions of years. And so one day the dot, the size of a dot on a page, exploded. And when it exploded, it went big. That's why it was the Big Bang, because it created everything. Think about that, okay? Think about what can fit in a dot. Do you think your Ford pickup can fit in a dot? I mean, please show me, Mr. Scientists. Show me how you can take, let's see, here's a good one, because I like all different vehicles, but take you a Ford F-250 6.7 liter turbo diesel and squash it down to the size of a dot on a page. If you can do that with all your infinite wisdom, I might have an easier time to believe you could actually take a dot on a page and create something bigger than a dot on a page. But see, you can't do that. You can't do anything like that. All you could do is take a fleck of paint maybe off of it, the size of a dot on a page, and say, here you go. That's all you could do. So nothing that you're teaching you can replicate. You can't replicate any of it. It's all pseudoscience. But you believe it because you're a scientist and you're smart. Just like Fauci. You don't have to believe me. I am science. Believe me, I am science. Sure you are. No, you're a paid devil is what you are. We've got those on. In fact, we've got those right now. If you're keeping track of the news, we've had Bill Gates again. He's over there with Trump right now, and Bill Gates is talking about more vaccines, how he's going to help save people now with his poison vaccines. The guy don't even have an education. He's not a doctor. He's not a pharmacist. He's not anything with biology at all. Nothing. Zero. He doesn't know anything about it. but he does know how to spend money, and he does know how to get people killed. So I wouldn't let the devil anywhere near me or my family. I don't care who he's sitting up there talking to. Okay, and he will, one of these days, stand before the Lord for all the people that him and his little pharmacy deals have murdered and killed. Yeah, he's going to stand for the Lord one of these days on that. And I hope I'm right there to see it. Okay, all the money in the world's not going to buy your way out of this one. Anyway, so nothing exploded into something. That's what they want you to believe. That's the current belief system of our government. That's what they teach the kids in school. Okay? Nothing exploded into something. All right? So that is the, like they're saying here, this is the academic mindset in modern science. Well, that ought to tell you everything you need to know about modern science. And I mean everything. It's these same modern scientists that are coming up with all this new stuff that you need to do. Okay? Okay. So evolutionary concepts were around in one form or another as far back as ancient Greece. But here, as we know it, Charles Darwin refined the myth, because it is a myth, to account for the origin and diversification of all forms of life on Earth, and earning him the most of the credit for the theory of evolution. Everybody's heard of Charles Darwin, Darwinism, everybody's heard of that. So in his 1859 book on the origin of species by means of natural selection, okay, Darwin envisioned that the species were relatively plastic, which that doesn't sound surprising to me. They're relatively plastic and could transform from one kind into another through a process called natural selection. So, yeah, no. I mean, God created them. He created different versions of them. Now, there's different types of evolution. There's like macroevolution, microevolution. These guys here are claiming that you can take a fish and give it enough time, it will turn into a man. That's impossible. Now, microevolution, like an animal that gets adapted to the cold, and it might grow a little thicker fur if it's in the winter, or thicker fur because it's in the cold. And if it was in a hot climate, it would have a thinner fur. But it's the same animal. It doesn't change into any other animal. Just little different things can adapt. Okay, that's microevolution is what they call that. Now, I believe that can happen. Okay, but let's say a polar bear, for example. You take a polar bear and stick it up in the North Pole, it's got a big, thick, furry coat on it. You bring it down south a little bit where it warms up, it sheds its fur, and it's got a thinner coat on it. And then you can put it back up there, it gets a thicker coat again. Okay? But it's still a polar bear, you see? It doesn't change into a fish because you take it up a little further north. It's not evolving into anything. It's still a polar bear. I mean, and it's never going to be anything but a polar bear. If it has babies, they're going to have baby bears. One of them's not going to be a seal. One of them's not going to be a fish or a chicken. Okay? It's not happening. It's never happened. Now, these scientists today, they believe that it's happened. Go figure. That's exactly what they believe. Okay. Let's see. So Darwin here argues that the nature preserved species that were favored to endure different environmental pressures and reproduce. So in other words, he believes they literally evolved so you have a fish, okay, and the water dries up where it's at. It either dies, and if it dies, then it didn't need to live. But if it wanted to live, it needs to quickly evolve some lungs and stuff and crawl out of the pool it was in, and now it's, something other, like a lizard. So it's evolved from a fish into something that can survive. So he thinks that, you put one in the environment, it will. So in other words, you put a polar bear up north and it falls in the water, well, it's either going to drown or it's going to evolve into part fish, part bear. And the next thing you know, it'll grow gills, and then it'll be swimming around just fine. Again, that's never happened. But that's what these fools believe. Okay. So in effect, basically what we're saying here is he replaced the God of creation with Mother Nature. So Mother Nature decides what happens. God did not create them, according to this devil. Okay, but in actuality, God created bears, and he created polar bears, and that's what they still are. They're bears. Okay. Okay, let's see. So, these questions ultimately depend on the early formation of molecules in living cells, but none of them could be answered by Darwin or his theory. Okay. Furthermore, he realized that the fossil record did not support evolution either. But he still believed that we'd find all the missing links between the organisms in the future. Of course, today, 160 some odd years later, the missing links are still missing. Now, if you don't know what a missing link is, picture this. Darwin here, he thinks that a fish crawled out on land and turned into a lizard. Okay? But he didn't do it overnight. See, it took millions of years. And it slowly did this. So in other words, there has to be lots of fish that have partial lungs and died. And then the next version had a little more lungs and then died. And then the next one grew little legs and some lungs and then died. And this took millions of years before the final product, which was a lizard. Okay, but all those millions and billions of animals over millions of years that died in this process, they should find them, right? They should find the bones. They should find the fossils, anything. But they don't exist. So if they find a fossil, they find a fossil of a fish, and they found fossils of a lizard. They found bones of a fish, they find bones of a lizard. But there's nothing in between of a fish turning into a lizard. That's the missing link. See, they don't exist. So, it blows my mind that somebody claims they exist, but there's never been a single one found, ever. So they're like, oh, they've got to be there because it took millions of years. And we're not talking about just fishes and lizards here. We're talking about supposedly dinosaurs. We're talking about Tyrannosaurus Rex, okay? The big dinosaur supposedly evolved into a chicken. A chicken. That's what they teach. So we've got this Tyrannosaurus Rex getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller down to a chick. A little chicken, okay? That grows about this tall, about a foot tall, full grown. So we go from something that's supposedly like 30 foot tall to something that's like 1 foot tall. It only took a couple million years. Well, where's the skeletons from the 30 foot down to the 1 foot? They don't exist. And it's hard for me to believe that the 30 foot tall ones exist. A lot of those aren't, they find these bones, okay? They find like one little fragment. And the next thing you know, they've got a full skeleton. Of course, it's not real bone. It's all plaster. And they just put it all together and say, this is what it looked like. A lot of the stuff, it doesn't even make sense, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's got these huge legs and huge tail and everything, got these little bitty arms at the top. I mean, so short that it can't even bend over and grab anything. Nothing. So, of course, I guess that's similar. That's probably where they came up with the chicken. See, a chicken don't have any arms either. It's got legs, got wings. That must be why they're trying to claim it. They're trying, it kind of looks like a chicken. It's all fake, guys. This evolution stuff is completely fake. All right, so it says, regardless of all this, Darwin, he duped the scientific community into believing his myth. Well, so yeah, so you've got a guy who comes out with it. Later on, he talks about the human eyeball and says it can't even happen, But hey, forget him saying it can't happen. Let's just jump on it and go with it. So the only reason I can figure anybody would do that is because they're a godless devil. And so you don't want to have to give God the credit for anything. So you're going to jump on some kind of ridiculous, absolutely absurd pseudoscience. That I guess that's the only reason why you do it. Okay. So anyway, so Darwin needed vast amounts of time, millions of years, okay, for small changes to accumulate into big changes. So yeah, that would be, you'd have to have a lot of small changes to make one big change, right? So, you're going to have a lot of little bitty changes to convert a Tyrannosaurus Rex into a chicken. A lot of little changes. But eventually it's going to equal a big change, right? But there's nothing in between. And you got all kinds of time, but supposedly, but nothing in between. Okay, so by the way, he figured all this out when he took a little cruise one time, and he was looking at some birds. And he went to I believe it's the Galapagos Islands, Galapagos, and he took a little trip down there and saw some birds. And he noticed that different birds, like the finches, different finches had different beaks. And so from him looking at a couple of these different birds, he came up with the theory of evolution, that they must have evolved. And that's why this one has a bigger beak than the other one. Okay? Now, forget the fact that they're still a bird. In fact, they're still a finch. No, they evolved. Can you imagine that? I mean, let's take men, for example. Some men have got bigger ears than another man. Does that mean he evolved for bigger ears, or does he just have bigger ears? I mean, he's still a man, right? Yeah. Well, my beard may be bigger than another guy's beard, but we're both still men. And our offspring would be humans. Nothing more, nothing less. Just because I look like possibly an ape, okay, doesn't mean that my children would look like an ape. No, they're still humans. Okay? So how you look at a bird and say, hey, that one's beak's a little different on the same kind of bird, they must have evolved from billions of years. So I'm going to come up with the most ridiculous. Your great-great-great-grandfather was an ape. And before that, he was a tadpole because I saw a bird with a different beak. The devil. I mean, you'd have to be demon possessed or have a devil whispering this stuff in your ear. How else would you come up with something so ridiculous? Okay, so let's see. Okay, for example, he proposed that notable differences in finch beaks provided supporting evidence, which is ridiculous, claiming their beaks evolved slowly through natural selection. Even though they're all there on the same tree. They're all alive at the same time. How stupid can you get? So let's see. Since then, intensive studies have revealed that Galapagos finch beaks undergo minute changes within the same bird in the same generation in response to seasonal differences in the availability and size of seeds in their diets. Wow. So if a bird gets bigger seeds, its beak looks a little different because it's cracking big seeds all day for its entire life, for generations, versus one that's cracking a little smaller seeds. Its beak might be a little not, it's kind of like a guy that goes to the gym or he lifts a lot of heavy stuff. His muscles are bigger than a guy that sits in front of a computer all day long. Okay, one guy that runs all day long has bigger leg muscles versus a guy who is in a wheelchair. But we're going to claim that's proof that they both evolved differently? No, if you use your muscles, they can get bigger and stronger. When you stop using them, they go back, they atrophy. Okay? Your body can adapt to its surroundings. That's how you have athletes. That's how you have weightlifters. That's how you have bodybuilders. That's how you have world's strongest man competitions. Okay? Well, the world's strongest man, has a child. That child may be a normal child that's not very strong. Okay? It may grow up to be just a regular guy or a regular woman, whatever. Regular boy, regular girl. Just because the dad was super strong doesn't mean that the children are super strong. He may just had better genetics. He's got bigger muscles for whatever reason. That doesn't mean that his offspring are going to have it. But his offspring are still going to be humans, regardless. And then if his offspring start working out and doing stuff or work in some field where they have to lift heavy stuff all day long, well, they're going to be bigger and stronger than offspring that do nothing all day long and sit and play video games. Okay, that never get out in the sunlight, that sit in their mommy's basement all day long playing video games. They're going to come out weak and emasculated, effeminate. That's what they'll be. Okay? That doesn't mean they evolved that way. Their environment has put them that way because they don't do anything. Okay? It's not from evolving. But these guys here, if they were to see that, can you imagine that? They see some big bodybuilder standing there, and then they see, some little wimp like Bill Gates standing there that looks like an emasculated devil. Oh, well, that guy there, he evolved into... No, one is a devil, and he's sitting at home all day long, telling what he's doing, a pedophile and all the above. So he's a shriveled up, emasculated wimp. Okay, this guy over here, he's been out in the weather, and he's been out lifting a bunch of heavy stuff, and so his body is built up. That's it. The environment. Okay? It's the environment that you live in can change things. Okay? Let's see how far we are along on this thing. 38 minutes. Well, anyway, let's see. And we'll just go over a couple of these things right here real quick. Let's see. So, moreover, in the evolutionary zeal, to find these missing links, conventional scientists have created hoaxes and made mistakes. Imagine that. They're liars. These scientists, they're devils and they're liars. Okay? They've made mistakes, all right, including the Piltdown Man, which I remember from my, high school days. Piltdown Man. That's proof we evolved, see? And the more recent half-bird, half-dinosaur called, I think it's Archaeoraptor. Okay, and I've got a magazine on that too. Supposedly what that is. Okay. So anyway, so in reality, there are few, if any, undisputed transitional fossils. There are none. There's no transitional fossils because there is no transition. Okay. But if you found a fossil or whatever, like this says here, they were buried by the flood of Noah. That's where they got them to begin with. Let's see. So anyway, yeah. So we've got lack of evidence for any type of origin of life as far as evolution goes. We've got lack of any evidence of any transitional fossils that transitioned from a T-Rex to a chicken. Don't exist. The missing link. That don't exist. Yeah. But again, that's what our modern day scientists are teaching. That's what they believe. And of course, I believe, which hopefully you believe if you're listening to this, that nature doesn't create life or transform one creature into another. That doesn't happen. I believe that all organisms, everything, was created with forethought and intention. and they can self-adjust or adapt to their respective environments. That can happen, just like we've talked about, okay? And they were all created by God. God created them. God created them, and He created them to do what they're supposed to do, and they do it. Okay? So, like the Bible says, everything was created through Jesus Christ. So He created them. And that goes for it all. So, regardless of what these modern day scientists are teaching, this evolution deal, it is a myth. It is fake. But, hey, that's what they teach to your kids. If your kids are going to public school, that's what they get taught. And then when they get out of public school and they go to college, that's what they get taught. I had a good friend who went from one to the other, and he was, he grew up going to church and believing in God. By the time they got through with him in his college degree, he came out, I believe in evolution now. So what, you don't believe in God? Well, I believe in God still, he said, but I just think God must have used evolution. Okay, well, that's pretty stupid. That God is so, inept that He has to use millions of years of trial and error to finally get a T-Rex into a chicken. No, I think what happened is if God wanted a chicken, He just created the chicken. That's what He did. And He created probably two of them, a male and a female, and they started laying eggs and hatching them out. And now we got lots of chickens. And there are chickens of different colors, and there are chickens of different sizes, and chickens of different breeds, if you want to say that. Okay. But they're all still chickens. And their offspring are chickens and will always be chickens. They're not going to turn into anything else. So, anyway, I just wanted to talk just a little bit about that. That was the myth of evolution. I've got several others I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about that bird that they found, supposedly, and it's been debunked. Talk about Lucy, which is one of the things that's in the textbooks, which is fake. One of their fake things to prove evolution. And, yeah, how about vestigial organs? They claim that, they've got these vestigial organs that, like in a human, it's the appendix and stuff, that you don't need it. It's left over from, when you were evolving. When in actuality, it's not. It's an actual organ that you need. It wouldn't be there if God didn't want it there. So, there's all kinds of that stuff. But we'll talk again, and hopefully I can come out and talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on in the news these days. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happening. I mean, if you don't believe we're in the end times, just take a look at what's going on around this world. It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Anyway, let's see here. I hope that you learned something out of this, or at least opened up your mind to think about new things. That's what we're here for. Truth Seekers Ministry. Check out our websites. We have It's Flat Bro at itsflatbro.com. We have truthseekersministry.org. We have KennyWilliamson.com. Now, on that It's Flat Bro, I'm putting new videos up there all the time about flat earth and just all kinds of different government conspiracy type things. So check it out. If you have any questions, comments, or anything, go to the contact link and fill it out. If you want a free sticker right here, go on there and fill it out. It'll send me an email, and I'll send you one. Okay? If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. I think that's it for today. Until we meet again, God bless you, and thanks for listening.